Hazelwood is a small town nestled in the deep South. It's known for its red clay roads lined with ancient oak trees, old brick churches topped with high steeples, and long-standing tensions over race that simmer below the surface. Each yard typically features at least one cherry or red maple tree, houses painted in white, and most neighbors are at least familiar with one another's faces. With roughly 30,000 residents, Hazelwood isn't large, yet it supports its own police department, a central hospital, several schools, and numerous small local businesses. In recent years, Hazelwood has changed somewhat. New families have moved in, including African Americans, Latin Americans, and others from various regions. A couple of modern shopping plazas have sprung up, slowly replacing the older charm, but also losing some of its traditional character. Still, most longtime residents remain fairly close-knit, conservative in habit and proud, often wary of outsiders. Here, the law is sometimes influenced by deep-seated prejudices. Within this cultural setting, part Southern tradition, part lingering distrust, an incident took place on a fateful night that forever altered the lives of two people: Marcia, a pregnant black woman, and her husband Gabriel, a temporarily retired Delta Force officer. They had moved to Hazelwood less than a year earlier. Gabriel Price was born on the outskirts of Detroit. His father worked as a mechanic, his mother a nurse. He grew up without wealth, but with plenty of care and nurturing. In high school, Gabriel showed talent in sports, particularly track and swimming. Later, he joined the U.S. Army, seeking discipline and a way to serve his country. His decisiveness and innate leadership eventually led him to elite training and admission into Delta Force, the Army's premier counterterrorism unit. He served for years in the Middle East and Africa, witnessing the horrors of combat. During his intermittent returns home, he sought peace by engaging in charity projects and programs supporting veterans. At one such Veterans Benefit event, he met Marcia. Marcia Williams grew up in a middle-class family in Georgia. From a young age, she displayed a strong-willed character and an eagerness to fight for justice. Her dream was to become a defense attorney for the underserved, motivated by her grandfather's story of racial violence. He had been beaten severely for venturing into a "no black people allowed" neighborhood decades earlier. That event became etched in Marcia's mind, fueling her desire to make a difference. While in law school, she was active in social causes. She spoke confidently, yet also listened compassionately. Partway through her second year, family circumstances, her mother's illness, forced her to pause her studies. It was during that time she met Gabriel at a charity gala for veterans. He was an honored guest, quiet and unassuming amid the bustling crowd. Marcia's first impression was of a tall, neatly shorn soldier, calm and reflective, very unlike the event's loud chatter. They chatted on the sidelines, sipping coffee instead of wine, sharing thoughts on peace, helping needy military families, the brutality of war, and social injustices at home. Something intangible drew them together. 3 months later, when Gabriel returned to the South for a training mission, they officially began dating. Though he was busy, he drove hundreds of miles every weekend to visit her. Their love grew through letters, late-night calls, and mutual understanding of each other's work. After 2 years, they decided on a small wedding, blessed by both families. When Gabriel completed an overseas deployment, they relocated to Hazelwood, a small town with a cozy house and a seemingly peaceful way of life. Both hoped for a happy new start. Hazelwood welcomed Gabriel and Marcia with a quiet atmosphere. At first, neighbors seemed friendly, although some looked askance at Marcia because she was black, and at Gabriel for being a former soldier. The couple paid little heed to the judgment, believing that living respectfully would garner acceptance. Marcia took a break from law school, planning to switch to an online program. Gabriel used his free time to set up their home, occasionally helping the local National Guard with training. Then came great news. Marcia was pregnant. It all felt like a dream come true. They would speak at length about their unborn child. She would bring up names, and Gabriel would smile softly. Life in Hazelwood appeared comfortable, until that fateful night shattered their serenity. It was past 10 p.m. on a state highway leading back to Hazelwood, lit only by a few lonely street lamps. A faint mist veiled the night, and the air was cool with the late autumn chill. Gabriel was driving a mid-sized pickup truck with plain leather seats and simple interior. Marcia sat beside him, arms lightly cradling her pregnant belly, gazing wearily out the window. She was in her 5th month, her bump visibly pronounced. Earlier, they had come from a small gathering at a friend's place in a neighboring town. A casual event with cornbread, hot stew, and tea, no alcohol involved. On the drive home, they softly discussed baby names. "I'm thinking we should name him Ethan," Marcia whispered. Gabriel glanced at her, smiling gently while keeping one hand on the steering wheel. "Ethan. Sounds strong yet gentle." She smiled back, her hand slipping into his on the center console. "Right. I want our child to be full of hope." Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights flared in the rearview mirror. A short siren bleated, ordering them to pull over. Gabriel's brow furrowed. "Likely a routine check," he sighed, easing over to the shoulder. "Are you sure?" Marcia asked uneasily, squeezing his hand. "Let's stay calm. We haven't done anything wrong." The patrol car parked behind them, its glaring headlights flooding the mirror. 2 officers stepped out, walking up to each side of the vehicle. Their badge-mounted LEDs flickered. The nameplates read Cole and Baker. Officer Cole, tall, buzz-cut, with a perpetual sneer, walked around to Gabriel's window and tapped on the glass. Gabriel lowered it, maintaining a polite composure. "Laid out on the roads, you two? Where you headed?" Cole asked with a slow southern drawl. "We were just leaving a friend's house. Is something the matter, officer?" Gabriel replied calmly. Meanwhile, Baker, shorter, more restless, shone his flashlight incessantly into Marcia's window on the passenger side, causing her discomfort. Cole jerked his chin. "License and registration." Moving deliberately, Gabriel opened the glove box, ensuring no abrupt motion, and passed the documents through the window. Cole took them with a disinterested flick of the wrist, letting his gaze shift toward Marcia. His expression hardened. "Your wife, huh? She's expecting?" Gabriel tensed at the intrusive tone but forced himself to stay measured. "Yes, she is." Cole gave a low chuckle and glanced at the license. He found the note about Gabriel's military service. Delta Force. He exhaled dismissively. "Delta Force, huh? Real tough." Gabriel did not engage. He simply nodded. He wanted this stop to end without escalation. Yet Baker was now rapping his flashlight against Marcia's window, appearing agitated. "What's the issue, officer?" Gabriel asked firmly. Cole smirked. "Step out of the vehicle." "What's the reason?" "Because I said so." Gabriel's chest burned with indignation, but his years of discipline had taught him to comply to avoid trouble. Marcia whispered, "Gabriel." He looked at her, letting out a silent sigh, then opened his door and got out. On the other side, Baker hovered near his sidearm, ready to draw. Gabriel stood upright, raising his hand slightly to show no threat. Cole smirked at him. "Put your hands on the hood." Gabriel clenched his teeth, stepping forward to place his hands on the truck's hood. He sensed something more was brewing. He'd encountered officers like these, eager to flaunt power, especially over black citizens or anyone they viewed as lesser. Inside the truck, Marcia's heart pounded. She wanted to get out and explain, but Gabriel signaled for her to stay put. He still believed this might end with just intimidation. Cole patted Gabriel down, muttering snide remarks. "Delta Force, big shot. Did you think you're unstoppable? Around here, I'm in charge." Gabriel stayed silent, holding his composure. But Baker was now moving toward the passenger door, hitting the window forcefully with his flashlight. "Get out," he snapped. Marcia hesitated, gripping the door handle. Gabriel glimpsed over, voice calm but urgent. "She's pregnant. Don't scare her." Baker laughed coldly. "Don't tell me what to do. You're already in my sights." Marcia lowered the window slightly, intending to explain she wasn't well. But Baker abruptly reached in, grabbed her arm, and yanked her out. She stumbled, instinctively wrapping her other arm around her belly. "Leave her alone!" Gabriel shouted, twisting away from Cole's hold. Cole seized the moment, firing a taser into Gabriel's back. An electric jolt surged through him, sending him crashing to the asphalt, muscles convulsing as if on fire. He could barely speak, every nerve alight with agony. Marcia screamed, struggling against Baker. Immediately, Baker flung her to the ground. The impact hit her back and abdomen hard. She let out a high-pitched cry, then fell silent, arms clutching her belly in anguish. Despite the taser still shocking his system, Gabriel instinctively fought to stand when he saw her fall. Cole triggered another pulse. Pain overwhelmed him. His vision blurred and his body slammed back down. In the haze, the last thing he saw was Marcia curled up, gasping for breath, tears streaming under the swirling red and blue lights. Gabriel came to in the Hazelwood Police Department's holding cell. His wrists were chafed raw from handcuffs, his entire body aching from the taser and the fall. The hour was early morning. The cell's disinfectant stench and dampness pounded in his head. Frenzied thoughts filled his mind. Where is Marcia? Is she okay? He banged on the bars, shouting for answers. After 30 minutes, a young officer named Conrad arrived, tersely stating Marcia was taken to the hospital. She's probably fine, he mumbled. Nothing could calm Gabriel's mounting dread. From the duty desk, he overheard other officers chuckling, uttering lines like, "That guy and his wife challenged Cole and Baker. Stupid move." Gabriel clenched his jaw, rage boiling, yet he forced himself to remain still. He had to get out of there and find Marcia. He demanded his right to call a lawyer, but was ignored with "wait your turn." Around midday, they released Gabriel without formal explanation. No clear paperwork. "Just go," they said, as if to cover something up. He raced to Hazelwood Memorial Hospital, heart in his throat. In the waiting area, he found Marcia seated, pale as a sheet, eyes red and swollen. She didn't break down sobbing when she saw him. She was too exhausted to cry. She only trembled, tears barely contained. Then she uttered words that stabbed his heart. "The baby is gone." Marcia's voice cracked, so raw that it barely formed the sentence. Ethan, the son they had dreamt of, was lost due to that brutal night. The doctor explained the violent impact caused severe trauma, and nothing could be done. Gabriel folded Marcia in his arms, feeling a crushing emptiness inside. In that instant, he knew both their lives had changed forever. At first, the couple clung to the legal system. They contacted Amanda Lowe, a local attorney known for fighting cases of police misconduct. Horrified by their ordeal, Amanda encouraged them to sue the Hazelwood Police Department and officers Cole and Baker. They filed a formal complaint, backed by medical records showing the fetus died from physical trauma. Gabriel's former Delta colleagues wrote testimonials attesting to his steady character and nonviolent demeanor. Clearly, he hadn't initiated any attack. However, the Hazelwood PD swiftly declared that Cole and Baker followed proper procedure, claiming the couple showed resistance, forcing the officers to use a taser. Mysterious statements surfaced in official reports alleging Gabriel was drunk and Marcia aggressive. Amanda was furious, but also no stranger to the harsh realities of small-town politics. The local leadership had strong ties to the police department, frequently burying misconduct allegations. Even more, Cole and Baker had fellow officers covering for them. 2 weeks passed with only letters stating "under review" or "insufficient evidence." The local paper refused to cover the story. Worse, some bigoted whispers around town suggested, "Why's a pregnant woman out late at night? She should have stayed home. Now they blame the police?" Gabriel watched Marcia sink deeper into despair. She rarely slept. Nightmares plagued her. Any mention of the unborn baby brought fresh tears. Every baby outfit reminded her of the emptiness. One afternoon, he found her folding tiny clothes they'd bought for the baby, tucking them into a corner of the closet. She quietly shut the door, as though closing off all hope. Gabriel approached, holding her hand, yet without words to ease the pain. That same night, as Marcia sat on the sofa, staring blankly, Gabriel called his old superiors, hoping they could intervene. But they could only respond with sympathy. "We're sorry, Gabriel, but this is a local matter. You need solid proof." His faith in the system withered further. Gabriel was no sociopath. He'd served his country, protected comrades, and witnessed devastation. He knew well that violence can ravage lives. But this time, seeing his wife traumatized and the perpetrators freely strutting around was more than he could bear. The memory of that dreadful night haunted him. Cole's smug grin, Baker slamming Marcia to the ground, and Ethan's life cut short. He found himself consumed by frustration. Justice had failed them. He began experiencing nightmares, merging the horrors of war with the faces of those two officers. This wasn't an enemy overseas, but injustice in his own homeland, cloaked by the badge. More than that, it walked free. Initially, Marcia simply grieved in silence. She had always believed in the law, but every legal path was blocked. She endured physical and emotional agony. The child she had cherished was gone before birth, and her world shattered. She remembered her grandfather's words. Justice won't always be handed out. Sometimes you have to fight for it. She used to think it mainly referred to the civil rights struggles of the past. But now it felt disturbingly relevant. As Gabriel quietly prepared for drastic action, Marcia sensed a new kind of fire behind his eyes. She herself felt an inner shift, too. She no longer wanted to remain passive. Her child's death must not be in vain. One night she murmured, "You're planning something, aren't you?" He exhaled slowly, gaze firm. "They'll never be punished otherwise. I can't let them get away." She stared at him, her expression mingling sorrow and determination. Gabriel had extensive skills: surveillance, ambush tactics, quick execution from his Delta Force days. He understood the art of intimidation, how to corner a target. At first, he wrestled with guilt, worried he would become as monstrous as those officers. But with each reminder of Marcia's tears and the vacant nursery, his moral lines blurred. Marcia did not talk him out of it. In fact, once she whispered, "I want them to know just how huge our loss really is." From that point on, a plan for retribution began to form. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and red foliage. By day, people strolled Main Street, shopping for spices and handmade crafts. By night, the town slept under a hush with few cars on the roads. Officer Cole lived in a small house on the outskirts, about 5 miles from town. The place was simple and somewhat neglected. Gabriel discovered these details through friends of friends. Cole usually finished his shift around 1 a.m., driving home alone, rarely bothering with security lights or fences. For a week, Gabriel discreetly watched Cole's routine. He drove a car with out-of-state plates, parking hundreds of meters away, observing with a compact monocular. Cole ended his shift near 1 o'clock a.m., steered down the dark country lane, and pulled into a driveway. No cameras, no guard dogs. Back at home, Marcia anxiously waited. She feared for Gabriel's safety, but also quietly approved of the mission. Her soul was torn between fear and the need for justice. Night 8. Cole arrived as usual, parking in near darkness. He yawned, likely buzzed from a few post-shift drinks, unaware that a highly trained veteran lay in wait. Gabriel sprang from behind a cluster of trees, swiftly striking Cole's head with his handgun's grip. Stunned, Cole stumbled and fell. In a flash, Gabriel landed a follow-up blow to Cole's ribs and abdomen, making him spit blood, reeling in shock. Gabriel pinned him to the ground, wrenching his arms behind his back, cinching zip ties until Cole's hands turned numb. Who are you?" Cole sputtered, trembling. Gabriel stayed silent. He wanted this man to feel helplessness, akin to what he and Marcia had suffered. He roughly dragged Cole inside the house, slammed the door. He gave Cole a few more precise strikes to the rib cage, forcing blood and spit from his mouth. Cole coughed, eyes bulging with fear, begging, "Take whatever you want. I don't have much money." Gabriel recalled Cole's mocking laughter that night, how Marcia had cried in agony, how Ethan was gone. His own soul felt cold, but he didn't kill him. He pulled Cole upright by the collar, pressing his face close. "Now do you understand what it's like to be powerless? My wife, my child, do you remember?" Cole's eyes went wide with recognition. You're that?" Gabriel jammed a rag into Cole's mouth and fastened him tight, then moved into the kitchen to stage a fake burglary. Overturned furniture, drawers yanked open, liquor bottles smashed. Before leaving, he picked up a pillow and pressed it hard against Cole's face for several long seconds, giving him the terror of suffocation. Finally, he released. Cole gasped desperately for air, on the brink of passing out. Gabriel left Cole battered and bound, humiliated and exposed. He vanished into the night. Word spread fast that another cop had been attacked. The Hazelwood PD was in uproar. People gossiped about a mysterious assailant brazen enough to invade Cole's home. Cole felt utterly humiliated but gave a flimsy statement. "Some pro-burglar blindsided me. I couldn't see anything." He was shaken by the memory of that intruder's wrathful eyes. Deep down, he suspected it was Gabriel, but lacked evidence. And exposing the reason behind the retaliation would risk reopening the entire scandal about Marcia's miscarriage. Baker Reeves, the one who had directly thrown Marcia to the ground, grew paranoid upon hearing of the Cole incident. He stayed armed even off duty and installed a front door camera at his home. He spent many nights at the local Black Oak bar where off-duty cops hung out to brag and drink, returning home alone in the small hours. Gabriel explained to Marcia, "He's more cautious, which complicates a direct house approach. We have to corner him elsewhere." Marcia placed her hand on his, voice unwavering. "I want to be part of it." He hesitated, but soon realized she had every right to confront the man who caused the fatal blow. Over a few nights of recon, they decided to strike as Reeves left the bar, typically around 2 a.m., in the desolate rear parking lot. It was a Saturday night. The Black Oak bar was loud with neon lights and rock music. Reeves's patrol car was parked out front as he came by after his shift to chat. Gabriel and Marcia waited in an older sedan parked discreetly down the block. Near 2 a.m., Reeves ambled out the back door, a half-crushed beer can in hand. The parking lot was dimly lit, only a few cars scattered around. He passed by heaps of trash bags, unaware of the two figures watching him from the shadows. Suddenly, Marcia emerged from behind a utility pole carrying a pepper spray canister, technique gleaned from Gabriel's training. Reeves heard the faint shuffle and turned, but too late. A spray of burning mist struck him square in the face. He yelped, swearing and rubbing his eyes. Gabriel came from the opposite side, tackled Reeves down in one swift motion. The couple coordinated perfectly. Blinded and coughing, Reeves flailed wildly but landed no punches. Gabriel locked his arm around Reeves's neck from behind, choking off his air. Marcia stood by, her heart pounding at the memory. This was the same man who had slammed her pregnant body onto the ground. She raised her fist and punched him hard in the jaw. Reeves coughed up blood, moaning. They bound his arms and legs, covered his eyes, and shoved him into the sedan's trunk. Night cloaked Hazelwood. Nobody was the wiser. Gabriel drove out to a deserted road leading to old warehouses from a defunct lumber mill. Weeds grew through cracked cement. Steel beams lay rusting, and broken windows let in pale moonlight. They dragged Reeves inside and dumped him on the floor. He whimpered and shook, trying to speak beneath the duct tape across his mouth. Gabriel stooped, voice low. "Uncomfortable, isn't it, Reeves? This is the fear you inflicted on my wife." They ripped off the tape so he could talk. Reeves gasped. "I didn't know she was pregnant. I swear, what do you people want?" Marcia crouched near him, voice trembling with anger. "You saw my belly, you laughed." Reeves mumbled a denial, eyes darting as though seeking sympathy. Marcia's fists shook, resentment flooding her. Still, she had no intent to kill. She only wanted him to suffer shame and fear. Gabriel recorded a short video, capturing Reeves's battered state. He then leaned in and said, "You'll stay quiet about who did this. If you talk, everything about Hazelwood PD's dirt will be exposed, and we'll be back." Reeves nodded frantically. He had no fight left in him. Marcia landed one final blow to his gut before they left, leaving him gasping for air on the dusty floor. Overwhelmed by pain, he realized his days of bullying under the badge were over. Hazelwood was shaken to hear a second officer had been assaulted under mysterious circumstances. Soon after, Reeves resigned from the force, citing psychological trauma. Cole took indefinite leave. The police department awkwardly tried to hide the details. No one publicly accused Gabriel and Marcia for fear it would drag everything into the open. The department was already burying the miscarriage case. Lawyer Amanda Lowe looked on, suspecting what had really happened. She met Marcia privately, advising, "If you retaliated, be extremely careful. The police can come back hard. I don't condone violence, but I also can't blame you." Marcia's only response was, "We did what we had to." Other Hazelwood officers talked in hushed tones about Cole and Reeves. A sense of unease spread. Who might be next? Those with questionable pasts grew anxious. They didn't know if someone was hunting the corrupt. The top brass responded with a hush-hush, handle-it-internally approach, burying the matter. They recognized opening an investigation would reveal skeletons in their closet. No one disturbed Marcia and Gabriel further. Both Cole and Reeves remained silent, whether out of humiliation or fear of exposure. The tension simmered below the surface. A few weeks later, in their cozy Hazelwood home, Marcia sat by a window, brushing her hair in the early morning light. The sunbeams formed soft lines across the wooden floor. On the walls hung family pictures, their wedding day, Gabriel's bright smile in uniform. Gabriel walked in, pausing to take in the sight of her. He offered a gentle smile tinged with sadness. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, setting the brush down. "Better than before." She no longer woke up screaming. Though her eyes still carried sorrow, at least the nightmares had eased. Both knew the loss of their baby couldn't be erased, but they had seized a measure of justice. One afternoon, Marcia visited a small cemetery north of town. She had placed a symbolic headstone labeled Ethan Price, even though the baby never had the chance to be officially laid to rest. She brought white chrysanthemums, standing alone in the autumn breeze. Dry leaves skittered at her feet, reminiscent of her grief. Gabriel didn't accompany her this time, allowing her solitude. He stayed home, reorganizing the old nursery, folding away the baby items with a calmer acceptance. He still ached for the child they lost, but realized there might still be a future for them. Ethan was gone, yet their love remained, and hope for new beginnings. A few days later, an old Army comrade of Gabriel's, Captain Wyatt Reed, arrived for a surprise visit. Wyatt, with a strong frame and seasoned face, carried a warm and empathetic air. He had come to show support after hearing about Gabriel's ordeal. Seated at the dining table, sipping tea, Wyatt listened quietly to the entire story, then said softly, "I understand your pain. Corruption can happen anywhere, not just the battlefield. I'm sorry the system let you down." Gabriel nodded, silent. Marcia offered a faint, weary smile. "We learned that sometimes you have to create your own justice. But I hope the system might improve one day." Wyatt's gaze was kind. "Plenty of good people are fighting for it. Don't lose faith in humanity or the future." Those words felt like a soothing breeze, comforting them in their dark memories. The next day Wyatt departed, returning to his unit. He said goodbye on their front porch, assuring Gabriel he was welcome if he needed a fresh start anywhere else. After he left, Gabriel and Marcia took a walk through Hazelwood. They meandered through a small park by a peaceful lake where ducks glided. The late afternoon sun cast golden ripples across the water. Hazelwood seemed quiet and serene again, as if no ugliness existed. Marcia held his hand. "So do we stay or do we leave?" Gabriel took a long breath, eyes on the lake. "I think we stay. We won't let them run us out of what could be our home. We're strong enough now." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with a mix of sadness and resolve. "I agree. There's more for us to do here. And who knows? Maybe the future holds another chance." He drew her close, their reflections wavering on the water's surface. They shared their quiet grief, yet also a flicker of hope. In the following weeks they lived more quietly. No officers came harassing them. Cole was mired in shame. Reeves disappeared from town. The Hazelwood PD reined in their rough tactics, mindful of an unseen threat. Marcia resumed her online law courses, helping local grassroots efforts. Gabriel found a semblance of normalcy, taking on private security training jobs. Whenever they thought of Ethan, there was a heavy ache, but they kept moving forward, hand in hand. The lesson wasn't just about revenge, but about love, justice, and resilience. When the system fails to protect the innocent, some people take action themselves. Yet they both recognize that violence also brings its own burden of guilt and complexity. They found themselves on their front porch at sunset, the sky tinged in orange and pink. In the hush, Marcia said quietly, "We'll never forget Ethan." Gabriel nodded, voice soft. "Never. He's always in our hearts." Far off, the sun dipped below the horizon, drenching Hazelwood in twilight. Perhaps more injustices and more officers like Cole and Reeves lurked, but as long as these two stood together, there was hope. The greatest lesson of all: love and resolve can endure even the harshest heartbreak. Justice is not always automatic. In a society where laws can be twisted by those in power, the innocent may have to stand up for themselves. While violent retaliation is never ideal, some situations leave no other recourse. The power of love and unity. Gabriel and Marcia faced the devastation of losing their child, yet overcame despair by supporting each other. Their shared bond gave them courage, preventing them from being crushed by tragedy. Faith in the future. Even in the face of corruption, they maintained a belief, however fragile, that good people can spur change. Though they resorted to force, they still hoped that one day a better system could emerge. An open conclusion. They did not become cold-blooded killers. They inflicted enough suffering to make the guilty taste fear, lose their sense of impunity. Then they returned to their lives, carrying forever the sorrow of losing Ethan. Still, they are determined to move on, believing that, somewhere on the horizon, they can find small rays of healing and the possibility of a more just world. The story of Marcia and Gabriel in Hazelwood ends in a blend of empathy, grief, and quiet strength. It's not just about the tragedy of a lost child, but also a lesson in inner resolve when confronted with injustice. May this narrative highlight the value of humanity, the limits of endurance, and the urgent need for accountability. The heartbreak remains, but they continue on, seeking a life that acknowledges their pain while striving for a fairer society. No matter what, we'll keep holding each other's hands. That's Gabriel and Marcia's promise, and perhaps the hope of many who strive for a better world where every life and every dignity are respected.